Hey, this is Sarah with Precision Camera in Austin, Texas. Today we are downtown. We just grabbed some coffee at Easy Tiger, and I have the brand new Fuji XF10. We're gonna review this today. We're gonna walk around and explore and test it out. Now, the first thing you might be noticing about this camera is that it very strongly resembles the X70. It is similar. It has the exact same lens. It's a 18.5mm lens, which is a 28mm equivalent. It's an f2.8. It is a fixed lens, which means there is no zoom at all. We've seen this kind of design in a lot of other cameras from other manufacturers, very similar to, say, a Ricoh GR, which has been around for a very long time. Makes for a great street camera, great wide angle. This does have a 24 megapixel APS-C size sensor. Now this is not an X-Trans sensor, this is a Bayer array sensor. That doesn't mean you're gonna get any sort of sacrifice in image quality. In fact, this actually has a higher ISO range than the X70 did. It goes up to 12,800 versus 6,400 native on the X70. However, Fuji is known for its X-Trans sensor. It's what we've seen in their higher end models. Has great color rendition, great texture to it. It's kind of the things that people love about Fuji cameras. So that is not found in this. Hence the price point being lower and a bit more affordable. This camera comes in two designs. We currently have the champagne version. It also comes in a completely all black version. As far as the design goes, compared to the X70, there's some major differences. This camera is very simplified. We don't have a full control panel in the back. We have two simple buttons. We have our quick menu. They did give us a joystick, which I am so thankful for. I think every camera from here on out should always have a joystick for moving your autofocus point. It is so easy and so helpful. I'm super thankful they put a joystick for controlling our autofocus point. The mode dial on this camera is more resembling what we find on, say, the XT100. We do not have dedicated shutter speed or aperture rings. We do have mode dial that gives us manual, aperture, shutter, program, and a bunch of other auto modes and scene modes. On the X70, if you recall, we did have a full shutter speed dial and an aperture ring. This camera is capable of 4K video. However, similar to the XT100, the 4K can only be shot at 15 frames per second, so you really can't use it for anything other than time lapse. It does, however, do 1080 at 60, which is kind of fantastic. You can absolutely take that into post and slow it down. This does have a full touch focus system, so you can touch to shoot, you can touch to just focus and then shoot with the shutter, or you can completely turn it off if you don't want to use it. This camera does up to 6 frames per second and goes up to 1/16,000th of a second as far as its electronic shutter goes, which is a little bit slower than we've seen in a lot of Fuji cameras. Most of them go up to 32,000th of a second. Something else you'll notice about this that makes it a little bit smaller of a profile, a little bit, is the fact that the screen is not articulating. I do wish that this had an articulating screen simply because there is no viewfinder. There is no hot shoe to put an optical viewfinder on. In shooting with this and playing around with it, I definitely find myself either wanting to do this or wanting to somehow position this, and it just wasn't possible. I understand why they did that, especially to keep it at the price point and to keep it different from other cameras in their lineup, but I think it would have made the usability of this camera a little bit more user-friendly. This camera does have a variety of film simulations like we find in a lot of the other Fuji cameras. It is missing a few. It doesn't have Acros, it doesn't have Eterna, things like that, but it has kind of the favorites like Classic Chrome, Velvia, Provia, etc. We're gonna test these film simulations out on our friend Sissy. Something I think that is fantastic about this camera is the fact that it does have a touch screen. So I can touch to focus. I can also touch to take the picture. And because this camera has a 2.8 lens, I get a nice shallow depth of field, depending on my distance between me and my subject. This has a new feature called Snap Focus, which is very similar to what I've seen in a Ricoh GR. It fixes your focus at either 2 meters or 5 meters. It's great for someone doing street photography or someone who knows they're going to be focusing at a certain distance consistently, so not having to worry about the focus adjusting. So one thing I like about these pictures of her crossing the street is that even though I was set to 2 meters, I was at f8, so it gives you some breathing room if your subject's moving around and kind of guarantees that everything will be in focus. I want to test the video out on this camera. We're going to shoot in 4K, which remember only does up to 15 frames per second, so it's going to look like a stop motion pretty much. I'm also going to try out 1080 at 60. We're going to try slowing that down in post so you can see what slow-mo out of this camera looks like. This camera also does in-camera rendered slow-mo. So if you don't want to take 60 frames per second into post-production, you can actually just shoot slow-mo right in the camera. Now, even though this is a fixed 28mm equivalent, they did include a digital teleconverter, so you can actually shoot at a 35mm equivalent or 50mm equivalent if you're looking for something a little bit tighter and less wide. If you're familiar with the X series cameras, especially the X100 series, you would know that the fill flash is actually pretty fantastic. I don't say that about most cameras. I definitely want to test it out with this and see if it lives up to the standard of the X100 series. So yeah, the fill flash on this camera is freaking awesome. I love it. I think it absolutely holds to the standard that Fuji's known for. Overall, I think the XF10 is a fantastic addition to the lineup. The image quality is great, the usability is great. There are a few features I wish it had, namely the flip screen I thought was super helpful on the X70 since it didn't have a viewfinder. I suppose if we ever see a follow-up camera to the X70, it would continue to have a flip screen. I do think that's a feature that would have made this a little bit stronger. But if you're looking for something that's economically priced, small, but is going to pack a punch with image quality, this is an amazing choice. Thanks so much for joining us. Hit subscribe and come to the store soon to check it out.